Have you ever felt invisible in a conversation? You're standing in a group, people are laughing and talking, and you understand, maybe 60%, maybe 70%, but you just don't know how to join in. You have a funny story to tell, a smart idea to share, but you're worried about your grammar, your pronunciation, so you stay quiet. That feeling of being on the outside looking in, of not being able to show the world the real you, can be one of the most frustrating parts of learning English. Well, today, that starts to change. Hello, and welcome to Best English Podcast. My name is Sophia, and my one and only goal here is to help you find your voice. This isn't just another English lesson. This is a place where we turn learning into living. Forget the dusty grammar books and the endless vocabulary lists for a little while. In this episode, and in every episode, we are going to step into the real world. We will share detailed, true-to-life stories. Stories about funny mistakes in a London coffee shop. About the anxiety of a first team project at work, about the joy of finally making a friend in a new city, all through the power of language. As you listen, something amazing will happen. You'll start to hear the real music of the English language, its natural rhythm, its everyday expressions, the way people truly talk. And by the end of our time together today, you won't just have learned a few new things. You'll feel more prepared, more courageous, and more ready to step out of the shadows and into the conversation. So, if you're ready to stop just studying English and start using it, then take a deep breath, relax, and let's begin. Let's begin our journey with a simple question. Have you ever misunderstood someone? Or been misunderstood because of a small difference in pronunciation? It happens to all of us. Let me tell you about my friend, Leo. A few years ago, Leo took his first trip to London. He was incredibly excited. He had studied English for years in his home country and felt quite prepared. On his second day, he walked into a small convenience store near his hotel to buy a simple item, a bottle of water. He walked up to the counter, smiled at the cashier, and said, "Hello, can I have a bottle of water, please?" The cashier, a friendly young man, looked a little confused. He replied, "A bottle of what, mate?" Leo repeated himself, a bit slower this time, carefully saying each word. "A bottle of water." The cashier frowned, trying to understand. "Butter?" he asked. "You want a bottle of butter?" Leo was now the one who was confused. Butter? Why would he want a bottle of butter? He shook his head and said the word again. Water. W-A-T-E-R. He even tried to make a drinking gesture with his hand. Suddenly, the cashier's face lit up with understanding. "Oh, water," he said, pronouncing the T sound much more softly than Leo had. "Right, got it. Sorry about that." He grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge behind him. In that moment, Leo learned a lesson that no textbook could have taught him. He knew the word water perfectly. He knew how to spell it and what it meant. But the way he had learned to pronounce it in a classroom was different from the way the London cashier said it and expected to hear it. It was a tiny difference, just the sound of a single letter, but it was enough to create a barrier to communication. This is precisely why listening to real natural English is so incredibly important. The more you listen to native speakers from different places, the more your brain gets used to the various rhythms, sounds, and melodies of the language. You start to understand that the T in water can sound different in London versus New York, or that some words might be linked together when people speak quickly. It's like learning to appreciate music. You can study the notes on a page, but you only truly understand the song when you hear it played. Listening to English is the same. It helps you hear the music of the language. And once you can hear the music, it becomes much easier to play it yourself, meaning it becomes easier to speak in a way that others can naturally understand. Now, let's explore another common challenge: understanding idioms and slang. These are phrases where the meaning isn't obvious from the individual words. They are everywhere in English, and they can make conversations very confusing if you're not familiar with them. Let me tell you about my cousin, Clara. Clara is a very talented graphic designer, and she got a fantastic job at a big marketing company in Canada. Her English was excellent, especially her technical vocabulary related to design. But on her first day, she found herself in a team meeting that felt like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Her new manager, a very energetic woman named Susan, was outlining a new project. At the end of the presentation, Susan looked at the team and said, "All right, everyone, we need to get the ball rolling on this as soon as possible." Clara froze. Get the ball rolling. She created a mental image of a large ball and people pushing it. What did that have to do with a marketing project? She was too nervous to ask, so she just nodded along with everyone else. Later that day, she quietly asked a friendly colleague, Mark, what the manager meant. Mark chuckled and explained that to get the ball rolling simply means to start a project or an activity. It was a light bulb moment for Clara. She realized that understanding English wasn't just about vocabulary and grammar. It was also about understanding these colorful, creative expressions that native speakers use all the time to make their language more interesting. After that day, she started keeping a small notebook. Whenever she heard a phrase she didn't understand, she would write it down and ask Mark about it later. Soon, her notebook was filled with expressions like bite the bullet, which means to force yourself to do something unpleasant, or break a leg, which is a strange but common way to wish someone good luck, especially before a performance. She learned that hitting the nail on the head meant describing a situation perfectly. This journey into the world of idioms taught her that learning a language is also about learning a culture. These phrases carry stories and history, and understanding them helped her feel more connected to her new colleagues and her new home. It also made her a better listener, because she started paying attention not just to what people were saying, but how they were saying it. Now, let's try a common idiom together right now, just for practice. I want you to listen and then repeat it after me. The phrase is, "It's a piece of cake." Let's try it again. It's a piece of cake. Great! This idiom has nothing to do with actual cake. It simply means that something is very easy to do. You could use it in a sentence like this. I was worried about the exam, but it was a piece of cake. Now, think for a moment. Can you think of something in your life that is a piece of cake for you? Maybe it's cooking a certain dish or playing a video game. Try to make your own sentence using that phrase. This kind of active practice is how these expressions move from your notebook into your active spoken vocabulary. Let's shift our focus now to navigating some very common, everyday scenarios. Situations you will definitely find yourself in if you travel to or live in an English-speaking country. We'll start with one of the most common, ordering food and drinks in a busy cafe. Imagine this scene. You're in a bustling coffee shop in downtown Chicago during the morning rush. The air is filled with the smell of coffee beans and the sound of conversation. You finally get to the front of the line, and the barista, who is moving incredibly fast, looks at you and says, "What you gettin'?" For a moment, you might feel a little overwhelmed. "What you gettin'?" is a very fast, informal way of saying, "What are you getting?" or "What can I get for you?" Native speakers often blend words together like this, and it can be tricky to catch at first. Let's say you confidently order your drink. "I'd like a large latte, please." The barista nods, prepares the drink, and then asks, "Room for cream?" This is another common short phrase. It means, "Do you want me to leave space in the cup so you can add cream or milk?" If you don't need space, you can simply say, "No thanks." Then, as he hands you the cup, he says, "That'll be $4.50. This is a very common way to state the price. It means that will be $4.50. My friend Isabella experienced this exact situation on her first visit to the United States. She told me she felt like she was in a movie where everyone was speaking in code. She understood the individual words, room, cream, $4.50. But the speed and the context made it challenging. However, instead of getting discouraged, she decided to turn it into a learning game. The next day, she went back to the same cafe. But this time, before she got in line, she stood to the side for a few minutes and just listened. She listened to what other people ordered and how the baristas responded. She heard, "What you gettin'?" and "Room for cream?" several times. She heard people ordering drinks to go, which means they are taking them out of the cafe, or for here, which means they will drink it inside. After just 5 minutes of active listening, she felt much more prepared. When it was her turn, the barista said, "Mornin', what can I get for ya?" And Isabella smiled and said, "Hi, can I get a large latte to go, please?" "No room for cream." Or, the barista smiled back, and the transaction was smooth and easy. Isabella told me that this small victory felt like a huge accomplishment. It taught her the power of active listening in a real-world context. So let's practice some of those key phrases. I'll say the informal version and then the more formal version, and I want you to repeat both. Ready? What you gettin'? Now, what can I get for you? Excellent. Let's try another one. That'll be $4.50. RRO. Now, the total is $4.50. Practicing these variations helps your brain become more flexible and ready to understand English in all its different forms, from the very formal to the very casual. Now, let's tackle another scenario that can cause a lot of anxiety. Asking for directions when you're lost in a new city. Technology is helpful, of course, but sometimes your phone battery dies or you just want to connect with a local person. Imagine you're a tourist named Ben, wandering through the charming but confusing streets of Dublin, Ireland. You're trying to find a famous landmark, but the map on your phone isn't making any sense. You see a friendly-looking elderly woman walking her dog, and you decide to ask for help. You approach her and say, "Excuse me, I'm a bit lost. Could you tell me how to get to Dublin Castle?" The woman smiles warmly and replies, "Oh, of course, love. It's not far at all. You just keep going straight down this path until you see the pub with the bright red door. The Telt, it's called. You can't miss it. When you get there, hang a right and walk past the old chemist's shop. It's a lovely little bookstore now. Keep going for about 2 minutes and you'll see the castle gates right in front of you. Now, let's break that down. Ben asked a clear, simple question, but the answer he received wasn't about street names like turn right on George's Street. Instead, the woman used local landmarks. The pub with the bright red door, the old chemist's shop. This is very common in real-life conversations. People often give directions based on what they see every day. For someone learning the language, this can be a challenge. You have to listen very carefully for the key details. You're not just listening for left or right. You're listening for door and bookstore. The key is to focus on these important nouns and adjectives. My advice in a situation like this is to repeat the directions back to the person to confirm you've understood. Ben could say, "Okay, so I go straight to the pub with the red door, then turn right, and it's past the bookstore. Is that correct?" This shows that you were listening carefully, and it gives the person a chance to correct you if you misunderstood anything. It's a simple trick, but it's incredibly effective. Let's practice the listening part of this. I'm going to give you a short set of directions, just like the woman in the story. I want you to close your eyes if you can and try to visualize the path. Ready? Okay, to get to the library, you need to walk to the end of this street. You'll see a big oak tree on the corner. Turn left there and walk past 2 small houses, a blue one and a yellow one. The library is the next building after the yellow house. It's a big red brick building. Did you picture it? The big oak tree, turning left, the blue and yellow houses, and the red brick library. This kind of mental practice, where you actively visualize what you're hearing, is a powerful tool for improving your listening comprehension. It trains your brain to pick out the important details and create a mental map, which is exactly what you need to do when you're listening for directions in real life. Let's move on to a skill that is essential for building relationships, both personal and professional. The art of making small talk. Small talk is the light, casual conversation we have with people we don't know very well, maybe at a party, a work conference, or even while waiting in line. For many language learners, this can be one of the most difficult skills to master because it's not about exchanging important information. It's about making a connection. Let me share a story about my friend, Nina. Nina is an accountant, and she had to attend a big, multi-day conference for her job. She was brilliant at her job, but she was very shy and was nervous about all the networking events. During the first coffee break, she got her cup of tea and then stood awkwardly in a corner, pretending to be very busy on her phone. She saw people all around her laughing and chatting, and she felt completely isolated. She didn't know how to start a conversation. She worried, "What should I talk about? What if I say something boring? What if they can't understand my accent?" The next day, she decided to try a different strategy. Instead of hiding, she decided to just listen. She stood near a small group of people and listened to their conversation. They weren't talking about anything important. They were talking about the weather. "I can't believe how sunny it is today. I didn't pack for this." They were talking about the conference itself. What did you think of the keynote speaker this morning? I found her points on economic trends really interesting. They were talking about their travel. "How was your flight in?" "I came from Toronto, and it was a very early start." "Us, Nina had a revelation. Small talk wasn't a test. It was just talking. It was about finding a small shared experience and building on it. So, during the next break, she took a deep breath. She saw a woman standing alone, looking at the conference schedule. Nina walked over and said, "Hi, there are so many interesting sessions. It's hard to choose, isn't it?" The woman looked up and smiled, relieved. "I know," she said. "I'm trying to decide between the workshop on tax law and the one on digital finance." And just like that, a conversation started. Nina asked the woman where she was from and what she did. She listened actively to the woman's answers and asked follow-up questions. For example, when the woman said she was from Vancouver, Nina said, "Oh, I've always wanted to visit Vancouver. I've heard it's beautiful." This simple comment showed she was listening and interested. The key to good small talk is asking open-ended questions. Questions that can't be answered with a simple yes or no. Instead of asking, "Are you enjoying the conference?" which can be answered with yes. Try asking, "What has been your favorite part of the conference so far?" This invites the other person to share more. And remember, you need to listen to their answer. The goal is to have a balanced conversation, a bit like a game of tennis. They say something, then you say something back that relates to it. Let's practice a few good small talk starters. I'll say a phrase, and I want you to repeat it. Ready? This is a lovely event, isn't it? Good. Here's another one. So, what brings you here today? On. And a great follow-up question. That sounds interesting. Could you tell me more about that? Practicing these simple, friendly phrases can give you the confidence you need to step out of the corner and start making those important connections. Now, let's discuss a scenario that relies entirely on your listening skills, with no visual cues to help you, talking on the telephone. Phone conversations can be particularly challenging because you can't see the other person's facial expressions or gestures. You have to rely completely on the sound of their voice. Let me tell you about my friend, Samuel. His internet at home stopped working one afternoon. He needed it for his work, so he had to call the customer service line for his internet provider. He was very nervous. He worried he wouldn't be able to understand the representative, especially if they used a lot of technical language. He dialed the number, and an automated voice answered. After navigating a few menus, he was finally connected to a real person. A friendly voice said, "Thank you for calling Tech Connect. My name is Brenda. How can I help you today?" Samuel took a deep breath and explained his problem. "Hi, Brenda. My internet isn't working." Brenda replied, "I'm sorry to hear that. I can definitely help you. First, can I get your account number, please?" Samuel gave her the number. Then she said, "Okay, thank you. I'm just running a diagnostic on your line now. Please bear with me for a moment." Samuel wasn't familiar with the phrase, "run a diagnostic," or "bear with me." He started to feel a little panicked. But instead of just staying silent, he decided to ask for clarification. He said, "I'm sorry, what does run a diagnostic mean?" "What?" Brenda was very kind. She explained, "It just means I'm running a test from our end to see what the problem might be." And "bear with me" just means please be patient for a moment. This simple act of asking for clarification changed the whole dynamic of the call. Samuel felt more in control and less anxious. The call continued, and Brenda had to put him on hold to speak with a technician. She said, Sir, I'm going to have to put you on hold for a few minutes while I check something. Is that okay? Knowing what on hold meant, Samuel confidently replied, Yes, that's fine. When she came back, she had a solution. The entire experience taught Samuel a valuable lesson. On the phone, it's okay to ask for help. It's better to say, I'm sorry, could you repeat that please? Or could you speak a little more slowly? Than to pretend you understand and miss important information. Let's practice some key phone phrases. Repeat after me. Hello, I'm calling about an issue with my internet. Good. Here's one for when you don't understand. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that term. Could you spell it out for me? And a polite way to ask for patience. Could you please hold on for one moment? When? Mastering these phrases will make phone calls in English much less stressful. You'll be prepared to handle the conversation clearly and confidently, ensuring you get the help you need without any confusion. Let's transition into a world where language is often more formal and specific, the professional workplace. Whether you're in an office, on a construction site, or in a retail store, every profession has its own way of speaking. Understanding this specific language is key to being successful and feeling like part of the team. Let's follow the story of a young woman named Grace, who just started her first job as a junior project assistant at a large tech company. She was thrilled, but also very intimidated. In her first big team meeting, she felt like she had landed on another planet. Her manager, Mr. Evans, was leading the discussion about a new software launch. He said things like, "Okay, team, we need to make sure we manage expectations with the client on this." And, "Liam, could you and Sarah touch base offline about the marketing budget?" Then, after a long discussion about a difficult feature, he said, "This is getting complicated. For now, let's table this discussion and circle back to it next week." Grace was furiously taking notes, but she was mostly writing down phrases she didn't understand. Manage expectations? Touch base offline? Table this discussion? Circle back? It felt like a secret code. After the meeting, she felt overwhelmed. She worried that her team would think she wasn't smart because she didn't understand. She decided to approach the colleague who had been so kind to her, Mark, the same one who had helped Clara with her idiom problem. She showed him her list of confusing phrases. Mark smiled warmly. He explained that this was just corporate speak, and everyone has to learn it. He broke it down for her. To manage expectations means to make sure the client doesn't expect more than you can deliver. To touch base offline simply means to talk to someone privately after the meeting, not in front of the whole group. And to table a discussion means to postpone it until later, while circling back means you will return to the topic in the future. He told her the most important thing was not to be afraid to ask. He said, "If you're in a meeting and you don't understand something, it's completely acceptable to say, 'Excuse me, Mr. Evans, I'm not familiar with that term. Could you briefly explain what you mean by key takeaway?'" Grace took his advice. In the next meeting, when a team member mentioned something about improving our bandwidth, Grace politely asked what that meant in this context. Her manager was happy to explain that it meant increasing the team's capacity to handle more work. No one thought she was silly. In fact, her manager later told her he appreciated her asking because it showed she was engaged and wanted to learn. This experience empowered Grace. She started to see professional language not as a barrier, but as a tool she could learn to use. Let's practice a few of these professional phrases. Repeat after me. Let's touch base about this later. Knows, mut. Good. Now this one. What is the key takeaway from this meeting? And finally, I'll follow up with you by email. 𝗟𝗂𝗶𝘀𝗵. Becoming comfortable with the specific language of your workplace is a huge step toward professional confidence and success. It shows that you belong and that you are an active, contributing member of the team. Expanding on Grace's journey, her next big challenge wasn't in a meeting, but in her email inbox. This introduces us to another vital area of modern communication, understanding the nuances of digital communication. The way we write an email to our boss is very different from the way we send a quick text message to a friend. The tone, formality, and even the abbreviations we use can change dramatically. Let's consider a friend of mine, Maria. Maria worked remotely for a company based in the UK. One day, she received an email from her manager that was very short. It said, "Hi Maria, FYI the report is due ASAP. Please send it over." That's Maria's heart sank. She read the email over and over. ASAP sounded so demanding. The X, instead of thanks, felt so cold and dismissive. She thought her manager was angry with her. She spent the whole morning feeling anxious, rushing to finish the report, convinced she was in trouble. Later that day, she had a video call with a colleague, a friendly woman named Chloe. Maria mentioned the email and how worried it had made her. Chloe laughed kindly and said, "Oh, don't worry about that at all. That's just how he writes emails. He's always very busy." Chloe explained that in a fast-paced work environment, short direct emails are very common. Abbreviations like FYI, for your information, and ASAP, as soon as possible, are used to save time, not to be rude. And the X is just a quick, informal way to say thanks. It wasn't angry, it was just efficient. This was a huge relief for Maria. She realized that tone is very difficult to understand in writing. An email that she read as angry was simply intended to be quick. On the other hand, a text message from a friend might use a lot of emojis, exclamation points, and slang to convey a warm, friendly tone. For example, a friend might text, "Hey, wanna grab coffee later? It'll be so fun." The extra letters, the question marks, and the emoji all signal excitement and friendliness. If your boss sent you that message, it would be very strange. This taught Maria to pay attention to the context. Who is writing the message? What is our relationship? Is this a formal or informal setting? Understanding these unwritten rules is key to successful digital communication. Let's practice understanding this. Imagine you receive this email from a senior manager. Please find the attached document for your review. I would appreciate your feedback by end of day Friday. The tone here is formal and polite. Phrases like, "Please find the attached," and "I would appreciate," are common in professional writing. Now imagine a text from a coworker you are friends with. "Hey, did you see that doc from Sarah? LMK, what you think?" Here, you means you, and LMK means let me know. The tone is casual and friendly. Recognizing these differences will help you not only to understand the messages you receive, but also to write your own messages with the appropriate tone, avoiding misunderstandings like the one Maria experienced. Let's move from the digital world back into a very practical face-to-face scenario that many people find stressful, handling a problem like returning a faulty item to a store. This situation requires you to be clear, calm, and confident in your speaking, even if you are feeling frustrated. Let me tell you about my friend, Alex. Alex bought a brand new coffee maker. He was very excited about it, but when he got it home and plugged it in, it didn't work. Water leaked everywhere, and it made a strange noise. The next day, he took it back to the department store. He was annoyed, but he knew that getting angry wouldn't help. He went to the customer service desk. When it was his turn, the clerk said, "Hi, how can I help you?" Alex started by calmly stating the situation. He said, "Hello, I bought this coffee maker here yesterday, and I'm afraid it's faulty." Using the word faulty is a great, clear way to say that something is broken or doesn't work correctly. He then explained the specific problem. When I tried to use it, it started leaking from the bottom, and it won't heat up the water. Being specific is very important. It helps the customer service representative understand the issue. He also had his receipt ready, which is crucial. He said, "I have the receipt right here." The clerk took the coffee maker and examined it. She said, "I'm very sorry to hear that. I can see the problem." Then she offered a solution. "We can offer you a full refund, or you can exchange it for a new one." Alex had to make a choice. He thought for a moment and said, "I'd like to exchange it for a new one, please. I think I was just unlucky with this particular machine." His choice was clear. The clerk processed the exchange, gave him a new coffee maker, and apologized again for the inconvenience. Alex left the store feeling satisfied. The key to his success was his approach. He was polite, he was clear, he was specific, and he was prepared with his receipt. He didn't blame the clerk, he just explained the problem with the product. This kind of communication is much more effective than simply saying, "This is broken," and getting angry. Let's practice the key phrases from Alex's interaction. Repeat after me. The opening line. "Hello, I'd like to return this item. I'm afraid it's faulty." Great. Now explaining the problem. "It isn't working properly." And finally, asking for a resolution. "Could I please get a refund, Artie, or could I exchange this for a new one?" Knowing these phrases can turn a potentially stressful situation into a simple, straightforward process. You'll be able to advocate for yourself clearly and politely, ensuring you get the outcome you deserve. Now, let's address a scenario that can be quite personal and requires very clear communication. Visiting a doctor. Going to a doctor's appointment in your second language can be frightening. You need to be able to describe your symptoms accurately, and you need to understand the doctor's diagnosis and instructions. This is a situation where clear listening and speaking are not just for convenience, but for your health and well-being. Let's imagine a woman named Elena. Elena had been feeling unwell for a few days. She had a headache that wouldn't go away, and she felt very tired. She made an appointment with a doctor. When she sat down in the doctor's office, she felt her heart beating fast. The doctor came in, smiled, and said, "Good morning, Elena." "So, what seems to be the trouble?" This is a common, gentle way for a doctor to ask what's wrong. Elena took a breath and tried to be as specific as possible. Instead of just saying, "I feel sick," she described her symptoms. She said, "I've had a persistent headache for 3 days. It's a dull ache, mostly behind my eyes. I've also been feeling very fatigued, much more tired than usual." Let's look at the word she used. Persistent headache is much better than "I have a headache." It means the headache is continuous. Dull ache describes the type of pain. Fatigued is a more precise word for being extremely tired. The doctor listened carefully, nodding. Then she started asking follow-up questions. Have you had a fever? Are you experiencing any nausea? On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the pain? Elena answered each question. No, I don't think I have a fever, and no nausea. I would say the pain is about a 4 out of 10. It's not terrible, but it's always there. After an examination, the doctor gave her diagnosis. She said, "It sounds like you have a tension headache, likely brought on by stress and lack of sleep. I don't think it's anything serious, but I'd like you to get some more rest. I'm also going to write you a prescription for some pain relief." The most important part for Elena was to make sure she understood the instructions. She used a great technique called checking for understanding. She said, "Okay, so just to confirm, you think it's a tension headache and I need to rest more and take the medicine you prescribe. Is that correct?" The doctor smiled. "That's exactly right. The pharmacist will explain how to take the medication. If you're not feeling better in a few days, please make another appointment." Elena left the doctor's office feeling so much better, not just because she had a diagnosis, but because she had successfully navigated the entire conversation. She had described her problem clearly, understood the questions, and confirmed the instructions. In a medical situation, never be afraid to ask for clarification. You can say things like, "I'm sorry, could you explain what that word means?" Or, "Could you write that down for me, please?" Mo, your health is the most important thing. One of the most beautiful and sometimes most challenging aspects of English is that it's a global language. This means you will encounter people speaking it with a wide variety of accents. Learning to understand different accents is a crucial skill for effective communication in our interconnected world. There is no single correct English accent. The way someone speaks in Texas is different from someone in Scotland, which is different from someone in Australia or India. Let's think about a character named David. David got a remote job working in customer support for a global travel company. His job was to answer calls from customers all over the world. On his first day, he was a nervous wreck. His first call was from a woman in southern England. She asked him to help her book a bath. David was confused. Why did she want to book a bath in a hotel? He asked her to repeat it, and she said it again, "a path," to the airport. He then realized she was saying path. But with her accent, the A sound was very broad and sounded like bath to him. His next call was from a man in Sydney, Australia. The man was talking about his plans for today. But he used a rising intonation at the end of the sentence, so it sounded like a question. "I'm going to the beach today?" David was confused and replied, "Are you asking me?" The man laughed and explained that in Australia, it's common to use that rising tone even when it's a statement. Later, he spoke with a man from India who used beautiful, formal English, but with a unique rhythm that David had to listen to very carefully to follow. At the end of his first week, David's head was spinning. He felt like he had been listening to 5 different languages, not just one. He talked to his supervisor, who gave him some excellent advice. She told him not to focus on the accent, but to focus on the key words in the sentence. She also suggested that he immerse himself in different accents outside of work. She said, "Watch a British movie one night." Watch an Australian TV show the next. Listen to a podcast hosted by an American. The more you expose your brain to these different sounds, the more it will adapt. David took her advice. He started watching the BBC News to get used to different British accents. He watched Australian cooking shows and listened to American podcasts during his commute. Slowly but surely, it started to get easier. He learned to recognize the vowel sounds of a Scottish accent and the rhythm of a South African speaker. He realized that every accent had its own logic and music. The key was exposure and patience. It's important to remember that you should never feel shy about your own accent. Your accent is a part of who you are and where you come from. The goal is not to sound like a native speaker from a specific country. The goal is clear communication. And a big part of that is training your ear to be a global listener, to be open and adaptable to the wonderful diversity of the English language. So, I encourage you, seek out different accents. Find a TV show or a YouTuber from a country you're curious about. It's a fun and incredibly effective way to improve your listening skills. Now, all the stories and scenarios we've discussed so far have been about short-term interactions. Ordering a coffee, asking for directions, returning an item. These are essential skills, but a huge part of feeling fluent and confident in a language is building connections and participating in a community over a longer period of time. This is a different kind of challenge. So, I want to share a more detailed, topic-based story with you now. This is the story of Matteo and how joining a book club transformed his English and his life in a new city. Matteo had moved to Portland, Oregon for a new job. He was good at his job and his colleagues were nice, but after a few months, he started to feel lonely. His conversations at work were mostly about work. In the evenings, he would go home to his small apartment and feel isolated. He knew his English was okay for professional tasks, but he desperately wanted to practice in a more social, relaxed way. He wanted to make friends. One afternoon, he was in the local library and saw a flyer on a bulletin board. It read, "Join the Northwood Library Book Club. We meet the first Tuesday of every month to discuss great fiction. All are welcome." Matteo's heart beat a little faster. He loved reading. This could be perfect. But then the fear crept in. His inner voice started asking questions. What if they all talk really fast and I can't keep up? What if they use complicated words about literature that I don't know? What if I try to share my opinion and it sounds stupid in English? This anxiety is so normal. But Matteo decided to be brave. He wrote down the date and time. The night of the first meeting, Matteo was so nervous he almost didn't go, but he forced himself out the door. He walked into the library's community room, and there were about 8 people sitting in a circle, chatting. A friendly woman with gray hair, the leader, whose name was Sarah, welcomed him warmly. "Hi there! Welcome! We're just about to get started." Matteo sat down, his hands feeling clammy. The book they had read was one he had enjoyed, but as the discussion began, his fears started to come true. The members spoke with passion and speed. They used words he had never heard before. Words like foreshadowing, which means a hint about what will happen later, and character arc, which is the way a character changes throughout the story. They talked about the protagonist, the main character, and the book's central themes. Matteo understood the main points, but he felt lost in the details. He stayed silent for almost the entire hour, just listening and nodding. His mind was racing, translating everything back and forth from his native language. Near the end, Sarah, the leader, looked directly at him. "Matteo, you've been very quiet. What did you think of the ending?" Everyone looked at him. His face grew hot. He searched his mind for the perfect English sentence, but all he could manage was a simple, quiet response. I liked it," he said. "I thought it was a surprise." The group smiled and nodded, and then the conversation moved on. Matteo left the meeting feeling disappointed in himself. He felt like he had failed. But then, something shifted in his thinking. He could quit, or he could prepare. He decided he wouldn't give up. For the next month's meeting, he didn't just read the book, he created a strategy. A week before the meeting, after finishing the book, he went online and searched for Discussion Questions for, and the title of the book. He found articles and reviews that analyzed the book's themes and symbols. He learned the vocabulary, writing down words like symbolism, metaphor, and narrative structure. Then he did the most important thing. He thought about his own opinions. What did he think about the main character? What was his favorite part of the story? He wrote down 3 simple sentences in a notebook, expressing his ideas, and he practiced saying them out loud in his apartment. He felt a little silly talking to himself, but he knew it was important. When the first Tuesday of the next month arrived, Matteo walked into the library room feeling different. He was still nervous, but he was also prepared. He was an active participant, not just a passive listener. He sat down, and as the discussion started, he listened carefully. About 20 minutes in, Sarah asked a question about a recurring image in the book. Why do you think the author kept mentioning that old, withered tree? There was a moment of silence. This was his chance. Matteo took a deep breath, looked at his notes for a moment, and spoke. "I have a thought on that," he said, his voice a little shaky but clear. "I thought the symbolism of the tree was very powerful. Maybe it represented the protagonist's feelings of decay and hopelessness at the beginning of the story." He stopped. The room was quiet for a second, and then one of the other members, a man named Tom, said, "That's a great point, Matteo. I hadn't thought of it that way, and it connects to how she felt about her childhood home, too." Another member chimed in, building on Matteo's idea. A real discussion was happening, and he had started it. A huge smile spread across Matteo's face. It was a breakthrough. For the rest of the meeting, he didn't say a lot, but he contributed one more prepared thought. He felt like he was part of the group. Matteo's story didn't end there. He kept going to the meetings every month. He continued to prepare, but over time, he needed his notes less and less. He started to understand the literary terms naturally. He became more comfortable expressing his opinions spontaneously without practicing them first. He learned to disagree politely, using phrases like, "I see what you mean, but I had a different interpretation." But the biggest change was this: the book club stopped being just about the book. Before and after the meetings, he would chat with the other members. He learned that Tom was a high school history teacher and that Sarah had a beautiful garden. They would talk about movies, local events, and their families. They were no longer just book club members. They were his friends. 6 months after that terrifying first meeting, Matteo walked out of the library with Tom and another member, laughing about a funny scene in that month's book. They were on their way to a nearby cafe to grab a coffee. He was no longer just practicing English, he was living it. Matteo's story teaches us so much. It shows us that persistence is key. It highlights the incredible power of preparation. And most of all, it reminds us that the ultimate goal of learning a language is to connect with other people, to share ideas, and to build a community. Matteo's journey showed us the power of joining a social community. Now, let's turn our attention back to the professional world, but with a more advanced challenge. It's one thing to understand the language in a meeting, like our friend Grace learned to do, but it's another thing entirely to use language to lead a team, manage different personalities, and collaborate on a project from start to finish. This requires a whole new level of listening and speaking skills. This is the story of 𝗟𝗲𝗏 and her first time leading a project. 𝗟𝗲𝗏 worked in the marketing department of a clothing company. She had been with the company for about a year and was doing well. Her manager, impressed with her work, gave her a new responsibility. She was asked to lead a small team of 3 to develop a proposal for a new marketing campaign. 𝗟𝗏𝗏 was thrilled and terrified. This was her chance to prove herself, but she had never been in charge of a project before. Her team consisted of 2 colleagues, Ben, a young creative designer who was full of energy and big ideas, and David, an older, experienced data analyst who was very smart but very quiet and often skeptical. The first brainstorming meeting was a challenge. 𝗟𝗏𝗏 started by saying, "Okay, team, thanks for meeting. The goal today is to come up with some initial concepts for the new campaign." Ben immediately jumped in. "I have an idea. Let's hire a famous celebrity, fly them to Paris, and do a huge photo shoot in front of the Eiffel Tower. It would be epic." 𝗟𝗏𝗏's heart sank a little. The idea was exciting, but their budget was small. It was completely impractical. She couldn't just say, "Ben, that's a terrible idea." That would crush his creativity. She had to use the language of positive redirection. She said, "Ben, I love your ambition. That's a really high-impact concept. Let's put that on the big ideas board. Or for our proposal today, let's also try to think of some options that would fit within our likely budget. How could we create that same exciting Parisian feel, but on a smaller scale?" 𝗏𝗏𝗏. Notice her language. "I love your ambition. High-impact concept." She validated his idea before gently steering him in a more practical direction. Her next challenge was David. He sat at the table, silent, listening to Ben's ideas with a frown. 𝗟𝗏𝗏 knew he had valuable knowledge, but he wouldn't share it unless asked directly. She had to use the language of inclusion. She turned to him and said, "David, with your experience in data analysis, what's your take on this approach?" By asking a specific question related to his expertise, she wasn't just asking for an opinion, she was asking for his expert opinion. David blinked, thought for a moment, and then said, "Well, the data shows that lifestyle images, people wearing our clothes in realistic, everyday situations, perform 30% better than high-fashion studio shots. The Paris idea is a risk." This was a crucial piece of information. By using careful language, 𝗟𝗏𝗏 managed Ben's creativity and drew out David's critical insights. A week later, the team faced another common challenge: disagreement. Ben had created some design mock-ups that were beautiful, but 𝗟𝗏𝗏 felt they didn't match the client's brand. She had to give him constructive feedback without discouraging him. She scheduled a one-on-one meeting with him. Instead of starting with what was wrong, she started with what was right. Ben, these designs are stunning. The color palette is fantastic, and your graphic skills are amazing. After he felt praised and valued, she gently introduced the problem. She said, "My only concern is about the tone. It feels very modern and edgy, and our client's brand is a bit more traditional and classic. Do you see what I mean?" By phrasing it as "my concern" and asking, "Do you see what I mean?" 𝗟𝗲𝗿, she made it a shared problem, not an accusation. They worked together to adjust the designs, and the result was even better. The final step was preparing the joint presentation for their manager. This required the language of organization and delegation. 𝗟𝗲𝗿 said, "Okay, let's outline the presentation. I think it makes sense for me to introduce the project goals. David, you would be perfect to present the data and research that supports our strategy. And Ben, you can walk her through the creative concepts and the final designs. How does that sound to everyone?" By suggesting a clear plan and asking for agreement, how does that sound? She made everyone feel like part of a team with a clear role. They practiced together, gave each other feedback, and when they delivered the presentation, they were confident and united. Their manager was incredibly impressed. 𝗟𝗲's big lesson was that leadership in English wasn't about having the best ideas yourself. It was about using language to bring out the best in others, to guide, to support, to question, and to unite. This advanced level of communication is what turns an English speaker into an effective English-speaking professional. Finally, let's touch upon an advanced but very important real-life skill: how to handle disagreements politely in English. In any language, disagreeing with someone can be uncomfortable, but learning how to do it respectfully is a sign of true fluency and cultural understanding. It's not about winning an argument, it's about expressing a different opinion while maintaining a positive relationship. Let's imagine a short dialogue between two friends, Liam and Chloe. They just watched a new superhero movie. Liam says, "Wow, that movie was incredible. The special effects were the best I've ever seen." Chloe, however, didn't enjoy it as much. Instead of saying, "You're wrong, it was a bad movie," which is very direct and can sound aggressive, she can use a more polite phrase. She might say, "I can see why you'd say that. The effects were amazing. But for me, the story was a little weak." But let's analyze her response. She started by acknowledging Liam's point. "I can see why you'd say that." This shows she was listening and respects his opinion. Then, she used a phrase like "for me" to show that this is her personal perspective, not a universal fact. This softens the disagreement. Liam could then reply, "Oh, really? That's interesting. I have a different take on it. I thought the story was quite compelling." Was her. Here, Liam uses the phrase, "I have a different take on it," which is another polite way to introduce a conflicting idea. They can continue the discussion, each sharing their perspective without making the other person feel bad. Another wonderful phrase for when you realize you will not agree is, "Well, let's agree to disagree." This is a friendly way to end a debate without any hard feelings. Learning these kinds of phrases is incredibly valuable. They allow you to participate in more complex and interesting conversations. They show that you can navigate social situations with grace and confidence. Let's practice one of these phrases. Repeat after me. "I see your point, but I have a slightly different perspective." Excellent. Having phrases like this ready in your mind can make a huge difference in your conversational confidence. Let's dive even deeper into proactive learning strategies. One of the single best things you can do to improve your speaking is to find a language partner. A language partner is someone you can practice speaking with regularly. This could be a native English speaker who wants to learn your language, or it could be another English learner who is at a similar level to you. The goal is to have real conversations in a low-pressure environment. So, where do you find one? There are many wonderful apps and websites designed specifically for this. They connect you with people from all over the world. You can also look for local groups. Many cities have language exchange meetups in cafes or libraries. When you find a partner, what should you talk about? The possibilities are endless. You can start simply. Talk about your day, your hobbies, your family. As you get more comfortable, you can choose a topic to discuss, like a movie you both watched or a news article you both read. The key is to make it a two-way conversation. Ask your partner lots of questions. Listen to their answers. The most important part of a language exchange is giving and receiving feedback. This can be tricky. You want to be helpful without being rude. A good way to ask for feedback is to say, "If you hear me make a mistake, please feel free to correct me. I really want to learn." And when you give feedback, be gentle. Instead of saying, "You said that wrong," you could say, "A more common way to say that is." Or, "I noticed you said goed to the store." The correct past tense is went. Goed is a very common mistake for learners. Having a language partner provides you with consistent real-world practice that you simply cannot get from a textbook. It builds confidence and can lead to wonderful new friendships. Another powerful strategy is to learn how to use media intelligently. Many learners say, "I watch movies in English," but they are often just passive viewers. To turn entertainment into active learning, you need a strategy. Let's take a movie scene. First, watch the scene with subtitles in your own language. This helps you understand the plot and what is happening. Next, watch the same scene again, but this time with English subtitles. Now, you are connecting the English sounds you hear with the English words you see. Pay attention to new vocabulary or interesting phrases. Write them down. If you hear an idiom like, "he's pulling your leg," you can pause and look up what it means. The third step is to watch the scene one more time, but this time with no subtitles at all. See how much you can understand now, just by listening. You'll be surprised at how much clearer it feels. Finally, take one or two short, important lines from the scene and practice the shadowing technique we talked about earlier. Try to say the line exactly like the actor. This multi-step process turns watching a movie from a passive activity into an intense and effective language lesson. The same applies to music. Don't just listen to English songs. Find the lyrics online. Read them as you listen. Try to understand the story the song is telling. Music is full of idioms, slang, and poetic language. It's a fun way to expand your vocabulary. Learning actively with media you genuinely enjoy is one of the most sustainable and enjoyable ways to improve. Finally, I want to talk about the power of keeping a voice journal. We mentioned recording yourself briefly, but let's make it a dedicated practice. At the end of each day, take out your phone, open the voice memo app, and talk in English for just 2 or 3 minutes. What should you talk about? Anything. You can summarize your day. You can talk about your plans for tomorrow. You can talk about something that made you happy or something that challenged you. You could even read a short paragraph from a book out loud. The important thing is that you are speaking freely and without pressure. No one else needs to hear this. It's just for you. After you've done this for a week, go back and listen to your first recording. Then listen to your most recent one. You will hear the progress. Maybe you're speaking a little faster. Maybe you're using more complex sentences. Maybe you are hesitating less. This practice does two amazing things. First, it gets you into the daily habit of speaking English. It makes it a normal part of your routine. Second, it gives you a real, tangible record of your improvement. On days when you feel discouraged, when you feel like you're not making any progress, you can listen to a recording from a month ago and you will have proof of how far you have come. It is an incredible motivator. As we wrap up this very long and detailed episode, I want you to remember that improving your English listening and speaking skills is a journey, not a destination. It's a continuous process of learning, trying, making mistakes, and learning some more. The stories and techniques we've discussed today are tools you can use along the way. Whether it's finding your voice in a new community like Mateo or learning to lead a team like Isla, every single interaction is an opportunity to grow. Immerse yourself in the language. Be curious. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Listen to the music of different accents. And most importantly, be patient and kind to yourself. Celebrate the small victories, the successful coffee order, the understood directions, the pleasant chat with a stranger. Each one is a step forward. We truly hope these stories, examples, and detailed tips have been helpful for you and have given you a new sense of motivation on your English learning path. The journey to fluency is built one conversation at a time, and you have already taken a wonderful step by spending this time with us today. If you enjoyed this episode and you want to continue improving your English with more real-life stories and practical advice, make sure you subscribe to our podcast, Best English Podcast. We upload new lessons regularly to help you learn in a natural and engaging way. And please take a moment to turn on your notifications. That way, you'll be the first to know when a new episode is ready for you, and you'll never miss a chance to practice. We love being a part of your journey, and we can't wait to see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening.